Well, hi, thanks for joining me. This is Gary Zacharias with the Apologist Bookshelf. J.P. Moreland is pure gold. I don't know if you read anything by him, but he is one classy writer. I have no idea how many things he's written. Everything that I look at and things I listen to that come from J.P. are just super quality. He's got a book called Love Your God with All Your Mind. I like that one a lot. This is one I haven't dealt with before. Randy Alcorn gives it a great write-up. He says this is a rare book. It manages to be biblical, deep, understandable, engaging, and practical all at the same time. As few books are, this one is worth contemplating, discussing, and putting into practice. I highly recommend it. So what's this one called? The Lost Virtue of Happiness. Now it sounds trivial, doesn't it, to spend a book talking about being happy. But JP does some wonderful things with that. So he says we're in an age of instant gratification, right? We know that. And his point is that life's best takes time and effort, right? If you want to put in the best, it's going to take time and effort. So he's going to answer the question and wrestle with the idea of what's happiness? Is it just gratifying our physical and emotional desires, getting to go to Disneyland, for example, or having that wonderful chocolate dessert? Is it a sense of satisfaction through consumerism? We bought that boat, we bought that new car, and now life is good. Some kind of short-term enjoyment. He said, but that's not really what the writers of the Bible had in mind. So he's going to talk about things like spiritual disciplines, different views of happiness, and it's got so many things to it. So the big point is, we are happy only when we pursue some kind of transcendent purpose, something that's bigger than ourselves. If it's all about us, we're always going to be unhappy. So I want to keep coming back to this book. I don't know how I managed to miss talking about it at all. But I'm just going to kind of walk through it. Here's the first chapter, and we'll come back to it for the second chapter. What a startling opener. He says, we've forgotten how to live life. He said, I don't mean that we're not active or seeing our friends or busy at work. He said, we keep up on things, don't we? We talk to people. We know what's on TV, what's out in the movie theaters. He said, we stay current with pop culture. We know who the movers and shakers are, the media idols. But he said, they're not teaching us how to live life, not even close. He said, what do we have? Empty, self-centered existence. And then here's a challenge to all of us as parents. He said, we don't know how to teach our kids about living life. We expect them to just figure it out on their own, kind of fall into it, just learn from others around us. And he said, but we've got to recover real life, the life that's been sucked out of us by technology and the media and our kind of passive education through advertising or sitcoms. He said, we have to return to the wisdom of the ancients. Now, that starts sounding boring, doesn't it? But he said, the key to living life is paradox. He said, think about what Jesus said. This is in Matthew 16. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. Wow. So he says the point of this book that he wrote is to talk about the paradoxes for living a true life and beginning to get good at it. And he said, if we do that, we're going to influence our kids and our grandkids. They're going to pick up a different set of values than what they get 5 hours a day over the television. He said, we can't get the life we want by direct effort. We have to learn spiritual disciplines. And so that's going to come up as we go through this book. But just to give you kind of a quick forecast, he's talking about Christian spiritual disciplines, such as, he said things like discipline of abstinence, solitude, silence, frugality, discipline of engagement, study and worship and celebration and prayer and fellowship, and witnessing is another discipline, and projecting warmth to other people. So we'll get to those. I just think that's such a challenge, especially for me. I don't know if it is for you, but I do get caught up in the busyness of life, and I don't do many of those things, and I know I should. He says, let me continue with this first chapter. He says, so do you want to be happy? He said, sure. Well, he said, we Americans are obsessed with it. Now, we're told in the Declaration of Independence that that's a promise to us, the pursuit of happiness. He says, we think we deserve happiness. And he said, if we don't find what we think is happiness, what happens? He said, think about the early French man who came over to America and tried to look at our country and figure it out, de Tocqueville. He said, if we don't get that happiness that we think, he said, people here have a strange melancholy in the midst of abundance. That's interesting. But he said, if you go way back, the idea of happiness hasn't always been so confused. He said, go back and look at the ancients, like the Greek philosophers. Look at the Hebrew figures like Moses and Solomon. Consider what the church fathers have said, like Augustine. And he said, on through the Reformation, until about, he says maybe the mid-1700s in Britain, just about everybody agreed what happiness was. So the Declaration of Independence says we have a right to the pursuit of happiness. They were referring to this early idea. So, for example, the Founding Fathers, they looked to an 18th century English jurist, his name was Blackstone, for wisdom and where we get happiness. He said this, the Creator has so intimately connected, so inseparably woven the laws of eternal justice with the happiness of each individual that the latter cannot be attained but by observing the former. And if the former be punctually obeyed, it cannot but induce the latter. So in other words, justice and all. It's a kind of old-fashioned language, isn't it? But they said, if you connect it a little more modern language, think about what C.S. Lewis said. It's pretty much the same thing. You can't get second things by putting them first. You can get second things only by putting first things first. Or what did Jesus say? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So he said, we'll get to this. He said, we'll talk about what the earlier writers meant by happiness. But he said, take some time. Let's think about what's happened in the past 100 years ago, because he said there's been a huge shift in meaning of happiness. And he said it's ruining people. So he said, if you look in the dictionary, here's what a recent dictionary defined happiness as. A sense of pleasurable satisfaction. He says, notice it's identified with a feeling, and it's a feeling like pleasure. He said, that's just a huge goal. He said the radio talk show host interviewed hundreds of people. He asked them, what did your parents want most for you? And guess what? The big answer was happiness. So he says, well, wait a minute. People are going to say, what's wrong with that? Having some happiness is pleasurable satisfaction. He says, well, no. Nothing, all things being equal. He said, I'd rather have fun than not have fun. But he said, in another sense, everything is wrong with that. Why? First, he said it represents a serious departure from a more ageless definition, what the classics believe. So he'll get to that in just a second. He says, in a consumer culture like we have today, advertisers want to create in us a continued sense of dissatisfaction, because we don't have the latest, we don't have the greatest, we don't have the shiniest, whatever it is. So why do they do that? So we'll go out and we'll buy that product. Oh, that will give us happiness. That'll give us satisfaction. So he says, what do we get? We get a life like a roller coaster, this need to be filled with pleasure. Is that a lot of pressure or what? Says, think about it. What does that say? Get that pleasure right now. What does that say? That the hard virtues of things like discipline and sacrifice and things like that are evil, which of course is not true at all. But if you want to be happy right now, then throw discipline out the window, throw sacrifice out the window. He says, here's another problem. Happiness can't be obtained by seeking it according to the way the contemporary word is being used. He said, that's true if you've ever tried to be happy. He said, that's a poor lifetime goal of pleasurable satisfaction. But he said, it's a byproduct if you strive after happiness in the classical sense. He says, think about it. If happiness is having just this warm, fuzzy inside feeling of fun or pleasurable satisfaction, where will we place our focus all day long? It's on us. And we're going to get a culture, he says, of self-absorbed individuals who can't live for anything larger than we are. And as parents, what do? We view our children as a means for our own happiness. So marriage and work and money and even God, he says, will begin to be just a means to make us happy. The whole universe is going to revolve around us, me, my internal pleasure. And he said, we're ending up with a society of empty cells. And then this is a wonderful quotation. Pardon me, I usually sum up what the authors are saying, but I love this quotation that JP has here from a man named Philip Cushman. The empty self, what does he mean by that? It's filled up with consumer goods, calories, experiences, politicians, romantic partners, and empathetic therapists. The empty self experiences a significant lack of what? Community, tradition, and shared meaning. A lack of personal conviction and worth. And it embodies the absences as a chronic, undifferentiated emotional hunger. He said, isn't that sad? He said, we get this empty self with its values and all. It says it makes it really hard to mature as a Christian. Really, really difficult. So he then spends a little bit of time, and I'd like to share with you, 4 traits, he says, of the empty self that undermines us. It keeps us from growing intellectually and growing spiritually. So he said it's coming about because we're redefining happiness as pleasurable satisfaction and making that the goal of our life. He said you probably recognize some of these in people you come in contact with. He said you may even find some of these in your own life. He said think about them. See if you agree with how harmful they are. So here we go. 4 traits of the empty self that really ruins us from growing spiritually and intellectually. Number 1, the empty self is inordinately individualistic. So it said, having a good form of individualism is fine, but the empty self, he said, that's all over our culture is a self-contained individual who defines everything about himself, his goals, values, and interests, like he's a little atom, just separated from everybody with no responsibility for a broader community. So the self-contained individual does his or her own thing and seeks to create meaning by looking within the self, inside. And he quotes from a psychologist who says, the self is a very poor site for finding meaning. Yeah, I'd say amen to that. I've been around a while. I get that. So there's one trait of the empty self. Here's the second one. The empty self is infantile. Really? Yeah, it said adolescent personality traits are staying with people a lot longer than in earlier generations, even into people's late 30s. It says, look at our culture. It's filled with pop psychology and schools of media that have taken over parental authority. TV ads treat everybody as young. The infantile part of the empty self needs instant gratification, comfort, and soothing. I mean, think about babies. What do they want? Right now, whatever it is, right now, instant gratification and comfort and soothing. So the infantile person, JP says, is controlled by cravings and wants to be filled all the time by food or entertainment or consumer goods. This kind of person is preoccupied with sex, physical appearance, body image, tends to live by feelings and experiences. And pain and endurance and hard work and delayed gratification are awful. They don't want to do it. I mean, I'm an English teacher. And so I look around my class. We'll start off, let's say, with 25 people. And by the end of the semester, this is a college group, so these should be adults, right? So by the end of the semester, that class is probably at least in half, and sometimes even smaller. Well, what happened? Well, it's not that I'm an ogre. It's not that I gave them too many homework assignments, pushed them way too hard, embarrassed them in class, harassed them. I didn't do that. I don't like doing those kinds of things. Well, what's going on? Honest to goodness, they do have some legit things that have gone on. They've had illnesses and accidents and home situations, so I don't downplay that. But I really firmly believe, back to what JP said, pain, endurance, hard work, and delayed gratification are not things they can deal with very well. I mean, think about it. They got to spend 16 weeks in that English class to get anything, as a grade. And that's 16 weeks. That's forever for a lot of these people because they want it right now. We're back to that thing about instant gratification, right? That infantile thing right this minute. So there are 2 characteristics, 2 traits of the empty self. Number 1, really individualistic, doesn't want to depend or deal with anybody else. And secondly, is infantile. Here's the third one. The empty self is narcissistic. That's just self-infatuation. Just the individual is preoccupied all the time with personal fulfillment. They have relationships with other people. Yes, they do. but it's to validate their own self-esteem. They can't establish deep attachments or make personal commitments to something larger than ego. The narcissist is superficial and aloof, and it plays it cool, and he or she says, I'm going to keep my options open. Self-denial, that's out of the question. The narcissist dethrones God. And the Christian narcissist evaluates the local church or the books or the pastors. How are they going to further my agenda? So the church becomes a means of fulfilling personal needs. God's just another tool, just part of our bag of tricks, like a fitness center or like our car. They're just instruments to give us a life that's full of joy and wonder and pleasure. The narcissist, JP says, sees education just as a way to enhance career. So it's not to develop an intellectual and moral virtue for a life directed for common good. That's not part of their plan. He quotes Christopher Lasch. Narcissistic students object to the introduction of requirements in general ed because the work demands too much of them and seldom leads to lucrative employment. Yeah, I don't want to be a better person. I want to make more money. Okay, so that's the third one. So one more time. What's the first trait of the empty self? Individualism. Second, infantilism. Third, narcissism. Here's the last one. The empty self is passive. The couch potato, he says. There you go. There's your role model. He said we're getting way more passive in the way we live our lives. We let other people do our thinking for us. We let other people do our living for us. I mean, think about it. All week, the pastor studies the Bible for us. We go on the internet, the news media does political thinking for us. We let our favorite sports team struggle and win for us. Our primary agenda is what? We want to be amused. We want to be entertained. Holidays are vacations. Think about the word holiday. It used to be holy day, something useful. But it's amusement. Now, when people live for pleasurable satisfaction, they become empty selves. So he said, God did not make us for that kind of happiness. Our lives end up falling apart. He says, look at the statistics. In the late 1980s, with the baby boom generation, Americans had a huge increase in depression compared to earlier generations. It's an epidemic, he says. That's terrible. And he's talking about one psychiatrist who says baby boomers stopped imitating their ancestors who were trying to live for bigger causes like God and family and country. They got rid of that, and they spent morning to night trying to live for themselves and their own pleasurable satisfaction. And how'd that turn out? Oh, not so good. Not so good at all. So what's going on? The empty selves. What are they doing? They're drinking drinking in happiness, trying to drink that in. They hang out with individualistic, narcissistic, infantile people who approach others as objects just to make them happy. It's ending up killing our relationships. It's killing our religious fervor. It's killing our very lives, he says. People are so obsessed now, concerned with feeling happiness. We are slaves to our feelings. Man, I've been there. I know that. That comes up often. I get it. JP says feelings are wonderful servants, but terrible masters. When people make happiness their goal, they don't find it. They start living their lives through others, with celebrities. Let's see how they're doing. Look at these celebrity magazines that are out. When I'm in line at a grocery store, I get bored. I'll read all these magazine titles as I'm moving my cart up toward the counter. And they're over and over again, it's the beautiful people, and we're supposed to be looking at their lives, right? We're going to live lives vicariously. He said people literally need to get a life. They got to find something bigger and more important to live for than just pleasurable satisfaction. They got to get a new strategy, he says, for daily life besides self-absorption. And so I think what I'll do is I'll stop at this point, and we'll pick up the second half of this chapter where he talks about the traditional view of happiness. So this one was kind of grim to get through, I agree, kind of sad, but I think you got to start with the problem and look in the mirror if part of the problem is us, and certainly the problem is in our culture, and then figure out things that we can do to change the way we live our life and what we pursue. The lost virtue of happiness is what we ought to be pursuing. So again, this is J.P. Moreland, The book's been out for a while. It's been out long enough. You can probably get yourself a cheap copy. It's been out about 18 years. So he had a co-author with that, Klaus Isler. So you may find his name in there as well. So J.P. Moreland, great thinker, great writer, challenges us, just a wonderful person. If you have a chance to read any of his material, I know you'd get a lot out of it. All right, well, thanks for this podcast. We'll do another one soon.